Welcome to Blueprint for Health and Healing, Reversing Disease from its Foundation. Hi, I'm Dr. John Clark, and our topic today is pandemics, cause, prevention, and remedies. There was a special psychological scale developed for the fear associated with the last pandemic of COVID-19. It included a lot of questions like, do your hands become clammy when you think about COVID? Are you afraid of losing your life because of COVID? When watching news and stories about COVID on social media, do you become nervous or anxious? These and other questions come from the Fear of COVID scale, FSV-19S. Created just for this ominous pandemic and its psychological aftermath. Pandemics. They've made their way into history. There's a lot of fear associated with them. And what is a pandemic? Well, realistically, pandemic is just any disease, be it severe or mild, that goes global. And the ones that are more dangerous, of course, create more fear. Who is the driver of fear? If we go to Hebrews 2:14 and 15, and we read, "For as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he, Christ, also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage." And so it's interesting that there's no fear in love, and God is love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. You ever been driving and see somebody with a bumper sticker that says "no fear," and it's usually a four-wheel drive with big tires or something? Somebody trying to show that they're not going to be afraid. Well, fear has driven the pandemics. The fear of pandemics has sort of been harnessed by a lot of places to get through interesting injunctions on the people, different mandates, and so, well, let's think about this a little more. What is the reason we're seeing more pandemics today? Why more pestilences, if you please? Well, Luke 21 tells us, "Then he said unto them, Nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. And great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines, and," there it is, "pestilences." Why? "And fearful sights and great signs shall there be from heaven. And then shall you see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with power and great glory." It's really a sign of the times. Do we expect it to go away, to become less frequent? No. And less severe? No. But let's make sure that we interpret aright to why it is appearing. God wants to wake us up. You know, Psalm says, "Except I'd been afflicted, I would not have turned unto thee." And so we want to make sure that when we see pandemics, we realize that something major is going on beyond the way the mandates are trying to drive the people. So who can you trust? Well, I'm going to go to Psalms 91, the great Psalms of oppressed people down through the ages. I'm going to go to verses 9 and 10 because it deals with pestilence. "Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling." Now, that's quite a promise. How do you make the Lord your refuge and habitation so as to enjoy His protection during the next pandemic? One of the ways we can make Him our refuge is by cooperating with Him by practicing good health advice. And so we're going to get into that as we go along here. The impetus for this is found in Exodus 15:26, where it says, "If thou wilt diligently hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, and will do that which is right in His sight, and give ear to His commandments, and keep all His statutes," He says, "I'll put none of these diseases upon thee, which I brought upon the Egyptians. For I am the Lord that healeth thee." Wow, so apparently if we follow His commandments and His statutes, we show loyalty to His kingdom, then He'll take away the fear that comes from Satan's kingdom, which is really the source of these diseases. I mean, there would never have been diseases if we hadn't had sin, and Satan is the originator of sin according to 1 John 4. So let's think about different statutes or commandments or health rules that would be very helpful. I like to go with what we call the 8 natural doctors. Here they are: pure air. I'll go with that. Sunlight. Abstemiousness, otherwise known as temperance. Rest. Exercise. Proper diet. Use of water. And trust in divine power. We'll come back to those in a minute. Not everybody is willing to have God be their protector. Not everybody sees His way as right. Not all the popular solutions to pandemics, though, are really even solutions. Some of them are actually counterproductive, both from what we know, from what God says, and also good science. But I really like to know what God says, because He predicted the pandemics. He says they're a sign of His coming, so you don't think He would have a solution for them? Yeah, for those who are willing to listen. And so let's look at these solutions of man versus the solutions of God. And for example, will a mask protect me? Well, in Leviticus we're told that only sick people have the obligation as a precaution of wearing a mask, or what was called a lip covering. It wasn't for the healthy, the well, the people who didn't have a disease. And so we wonder why the well people are being stifled and suffocated with face coverings. And in fact, in the Bible, these face coverings had a bad connotation. They sort of, in some verses, indicated that people who felt they were receiving no help from God would be forced or likely to wear these face coverings. Well, that's God. Let's look at science. You know, science has been able to look at this. And here's a very good article from 2021 in which a very good scientist went through the literature and pulled out previously published studies and showed that when you use a mask, you go into hypoxia. Your oxygen goes down. You go into hypercapnia. That means your carbon dioxide goes up. You get shortness of breath. You have all kinds of problems that you can see listed there. And then the psychological effects. Yeah, there's psychological effects. There's an activation of your fight-flight stress response. That didn't sound good. There's chronic stress condition. That leads to all kinds of physiological problems. Fear. Oh, we just read about fear, didn't we? People wearing a mask feel more fear. I mean, and mood disturbances and so forth. And then the health consequences. Well, you just think what would happen if you put a plastic bag over your head. You know, all these plastic bags say, don't give this to your kids. If they put them over their heads, they'll be suffocated. And so the health consequences: increased predisposition to viral and infectious illness. What happens is you get the virus into your respiratory tract, and then the mask just keeps it in there and recirculates it, and pretty soon it's going to find a landing spot and somewhere to get you sick. So no, masks are neither biblical nor scientific. What about vaccine? What is a vaccine? Well, let's go to Wikipedia. A lot of people turn to Wikipedia for information, and of course they're sourcing it from like the CDC, but vaccination is the administration of a vaccine to help the immune system develop immunity from a disease. Vaccines contain a microorganism or virus in a weakened, alive, or killed state, or proteins or toxins from the organism. In stimulating the body's adaptive immunity, they help prevent sickness from an infectious disease. So they say. Really, so vaccine is taking some identifiable part of a disease and injecting it via needle into the body, and with the idea in mind that they're going to be stimulating the body to prepare its immune system for future encounters with this disease. What does God say about encounters? Purposeful, presumptuous encounters with disease. Well, He's not real fond of it. You know, all disease is a result of sin, and He has a lot to say about sin. And so if we go to Leviticus, we learn that God is very clear that you don't just go out and expose yourself to disease. He tells us that anytime you do that, you are defiled, you are unclean, and that uncleanness makes it so that you have to separate yourself from other people. This uncleanness is identified from diseases such as smallpox. In Leviticus 15:8, if you come in contact with the body fluids of somebody who's sick, you become defiled and unclean. What is the significance of defilement and uncleanness? Well, in Leviticus 5, it's very clear that when you get defiled or get unclean, it's categorized as an iniquity or a sin for which a blood atonement is required. In other words, the death of Christ. And so that puts it in the category as being a moral issue. In Numbers 19:20, if you fail to submit to the regulations dealing with the defilement of sin, the application of an atonement, then you are cut off from the congregation. So, to summarize, disease contamination is a serious matter. How serious? In today's terms, we would say it is a salvational issue and a test of fellowship. God isn't asking anybody to go around and get contaminated with disease. In fact, He's against it. In fact, it cost Jesus His life because only through His stripes is anybody healed. Well, the whole idea of vaccination is fraught with contradictions. I mean, just look what Job says. Who can bring a clean thing out of an unclean? Not one. So, the idea of injecting you with something unclean, iniquity or sin, and that you'll come out better off, it sounds a little like eating from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. If you eat this stuff, you'll be a lot smarter. Well, a lot smarter for sure. And so the idea that exposure to disease can make you healthy is an affront to God and what He has said. Vaccination is deliberate defilement of your God-given body with disease in flagrant violation of God's health statutes. And just from a science, so we started out with the Bible, go into science again. From a scientific point of view, needling the immune system is counterproductive. Receiving a hepatitis B vaccine, that's what they're giving to babies now. Receiving a hepatitis B vaccine increases the odds of acquiring multiple sclerosis by 420%, lupus erythematosus by 810%, and rheumatoid arthritis by 1,700%. And what about social distancing? Well, certainly if you're sick, the Bible suggests or commands that you social distance. God instituted social distancing or quarantine for the sick, and it's been the most effective. Truth be known, that's done more to stop diseases throughout history than some of these other interventions we've been talking about. But He didn't quarantine healthy people. He didn't quarantine people who were well. like they've been doing, where they force them to stay home, limit their access to shopping, and tell them to skip church. Skip church. Oh, is church theirs? No, church is God's. Oh, so how are they telling people to skip church? What does God say? Well, for those who are well, the Bible clearly states how to conduct themselves during a pandemic. I mean, God's survival technique. Here it goes. You are to go to the meeting place and pray that God will avert the pestilence. Yeah, this is according to 2 Chronicles 20:8-9. It'd be nice to have a few more people praying at the church if there's a pestilence, wouldn't you say? And if you humble yourself and pray, God promises to hear and answer your prayers for the pestilence. This is only if you're well. If you're sick, you're required to stay home. And that's Numbers 5:2 and 3. And so we said earlier by reading Exodus 15:26 that obedience to God's commandments would be the way that He would know who He could keep from getting the illnesses that were going around, and that He would be your healer. And so we want to look at these in detail, but obedience to His commandments regarding health as well as morals is key to avoiding sickness and also securing His healing should you get sick. Well, what would be some of those commandments? How about the fourth commandment, which commands that we assemble publicly on the Sabbath day? Leviticus 23:3 says that it is a holy convocation. And so we're especially supposed to gather at the church or synagogue. This is clearly spelled out in Hebrews in the New Testament, 10 verse 25, where it says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching. The Greek word here in the original language for assembling ourselves together is synagogue. It's like saying at the epicenter or at the synagogue or church. And so you're especially supposed to meet at the church, so much the more as you see the day approaching. Wasn't that sort of dangerous for everybody to get together and, shake hands and, that seems worrisome, doesn't it? Well, actually, before you do that, the head elders, the pastor, are all supposed to get together, and they are supposed to pray over the church. Pray for the assembly. Pray that there will be no health issues, and that people can then trust in God for the prevention of an outbreak. Interesting, huh? Let's get back to this idea of so much the more as you see the day approaching. What are we talking about as the day approaching? Notice the passage also says that we should especially be careful to gather so much the more as you see the day approaching. Well, that day, as we quoted earlier in Luke 21, is the coming of the Lord, the return of Christ, the day of Christ's return. As we quoted, it said that there would be more pestilences, that pestilences would herald the day of His return. So, if there's a pandemic, the day of His approaching is even nearer, and the meeting together is even more strongly commanded. And we were told to stay home. Well, and what if you're so afraid you do stay home? What if you're afraid of getting the pandemic or the people who told you to stay home or whatever? What then? Well, it's interesting when Moses went before Pharaoh to ask him to let the people go into the wilderness for a 3-day convocation, gathering, assembly, that he told Pharaoh, if we don't get to do this, the Lord will send a pestilence on us. Interesting. So, staying home when God said go to church isn't a good idea. And it's also very interesting that no time in the history of the Bible does it say it was a really bad year, we had a really bad bug come around, and a lot of people caught it. Every time it's associated with sin amongst the people. Well, God has not given us a spirit of fear. He's given us a spirit of power and love and of a sound mind. That's the best approach. And people who do that, who have the best psychological outlook, who are the most grateful, for example, have the best immune systems. So let's get into practical advice that deals with prevention from a standpoint of health laws that God recommends. Lord Palmerston of England was petitioned by the Scottish clergy to appoint a day for fasting in prayer to avert the cholera, which was the pandemic of their day. He replied, in effect, "Cleanse and disinfect your streets and houses, promote cleanliness and health among the poor, and see that they are plentifully supplied with good food and raiment, and employ right sanitary measures generally, and you will have no occasion to fast and pray. Nor will the Lord hear your prayers while these, his preventives, remain unheeded." I don't know what happened to his popularity index after that, but I want to, take my hat off to the man. It's very clear that he saw that doing something, especially in line with what God said, was more important than praying and not doing it. So let's look at the 8 natural doctors, as I'm talking about here, as being some of the health laws to which we would be referring, that God would say would be the ones that he can honor. And let's just start moving forward with this in the idea of how can we prevent and also treat pandemics. And so we ask to be kept from the pestilence that walketh in darkness. That's an important thing to do. We keep praying. That is stalking with such power through the world. We are then to cooperate with God, observing the laws of health and life. Having done all that we possibly can, we are to keep asking in faith for health and strength. We are to eat the food which will preserve the health of the body. God gives us no encouragement that he will do for us what we can do for ourselves. So what happens when the virus comes around? What does the body do? What is its first line of defense? Well, here is a chart. Up one side we have the number of viruses. Across the bottom we have the time. If the person gets attacked by a virus at the very start of the graph, the viruses tend to grow exponentially. They really increase in numbers very, very fast. Once they've done this, it triggers the body to start working with natural killer cells and interferon. Natural killer cells are white cells, especially dedicated to viral elimination. And interferon is their antiviral natural chemical. And if you have good natural killer cells and good interferon, then you'll see those viral numbers drop off significantly. And that's very important, because if that didn't happen, you'd probably die. And so that's the first line of defense from the very point that the infection is detected. Then the next thing you need is another set of white cells known as the B cells, and they produce IgA once they see the infection. And if you have those intact, then you can get the infection totally under control and survive. So would it make good sense to look at what would help us to have better numbers and activity of natural killer cells, more efficient release of interferon and activity of interferon, to look at what would improve B cells and their activity, and what would help IgA to be in larger quantities and of a better quality? For sure. So we're going to look at these things that boost the immune system, that help you to avoid a pandemic, to help you survive a pandemic, to help you perhaps go into the pandemic without fear, but with anticipation as to, what you can do. So let's start with the pure air. We'll go through these eight natural remedies as we spoke about, one by one. And certainly pure air is going to be a good answer. And if you don't have pure air, you're in trouble. Because if there's lots of pollution, then you're going to have an immune system that gets wiped out. Things like too much ozone or sulfur dioxide or just plain particulate matter. And people under environments where there are cities with pollution, industry with pollution, areas of the country where there's lots of dust storms and so forth, or smoke, they are at increased risk of viral infections. So pure air is definitely part of the answer. Keep it clean. Well, what do I do? Put on a mask in the city? Nah, probably better to stay out of the city, get out in the country. When you go into the city and you work in an office all day, you're in trouble because they have all kinds of chemicals in the modern building materials. They did a remodel on the office of some office workers. They were going to change out a lot of things, and so they thought they'd make a study out of it. They tested the office workers' natural killer cell activity before the remodel. And then in the remodeling, they changed out carpets, insulation boards in the walls. They changed out draperies and furniture. And then they checked the levels of formaldehyde, phenol, chloral hydrocarbons, and they discovered that they were toxic levels. And then they checked the people's natural killer cell activity, and they discovered that their natural killer cell activity and numbers were way down. Those people are at increased risk of not only viral infections and pandemic infections, but cancer and other diseases that you wouldn't want either. Another thing that will wipe out your natural killer cell activity is being in a moldy environment. Exposure to mold from like water-damaged buildings and wet corners, leaks in your roof, being near streams of water and lowland and anywhere where there's large compost heaps and things rotting. And people living in these environments suffer decreased activity of their natural killer cells, definitely more respiratory tract infections, much more likely to get a pandemic disease. Much better to live on a hilltop where there's lots of sun, a lot of open air coming to your house. And when you get outdoors, and especially in the morning near a pool of water, there's a lot more negative ions in the air. Those negative charged ions help your natural killer cells. They help keep the air clean as well. They help destroy microbes in the air. And so if you can be where there's fresh air, especially after a rain, especially near the ocean, especially near bodies of water, or when there's early morning dew, it's very helpful. I mean, having a job where you're outdoors, not under air conditioning, you have a much better chance. People under air conditioning are more likely to catch several different diseases, some of which are these pandemics. During COVID-19, the last pandemic, people with greater outdoor exposure and way of life suffered far less COVID-19 and were much less likely to die or get seriously ill. Now, we have a long history on this that goes all the way back at least to the 1918 Spanish influenza, where when they ran out of hospital beds, they put people out on the lawn. When they put people out in the lawn in tents, lo and behold, those people survived the flu much more readily. And so this became known as the outdoor fresh air cure. Those tents became the most expensive beds on the compound. Can't say in the hospital, on the compound. And so they learned that when people were outdoors, it was beneficial. Things that are outdoors that are especially helpful are things like trees, especially pine trees, trees with a nice aroma. There's health in the fragrance of the pine and the cedar and the fir. And there are several other kinds of trees that have medicinal properties that are health promoting. You don't tend to find this so much in a city. Studies of pine cones, pine cone extracts have shown that they have very good phytochemicals that help to suppress the growth of viruses in the cells. This was like virus birth control. Now, some people use pine as an oil in like diffusers, and that's a very good thing. you can also use citrus or citrus oils. Citrus has been shown to inhibit viruses as well. One of the things in citrus that's particularly helpful is D-limonene. And it was a potent inhibitor of COVID-19. And so one of my friends was having a lot of his patients take a lemon, organic lemon, cut it into small slices and actually eat the whole slice, peel and all. And for the benefit of this D-limonene, which is more abundant in the skin with the oils than in the actual fruit. And so it's a very helpful thing, and there's also hesperidin comes in lemons. So lemons are sort of like a superfood for pandemic preparedness. I at least like to put lemon juice in my water in the morning. Other things that are helpful are juniper oil, sage oil. These have medicinal properties. They're antiviral, particularly for pandemics like coronavirus. Sage tea would also be good, not just the oil. And what it does is it blocks the ability of some viruses to enter the cells. And sometimes you might take sage oil or some of these plant oils, these medicinal oils, and you might put them with a carrier oil like coconut oil or almond oil or castor oil, and then rub it on your hands and feet. And those are areas where your skin's quite porous and it can be absorbed into your circulation. Big benefits from these kind of things. Well, let's talk about sunlight. A lot of people like to hide from the sun. Some people on purpose, others just never decide to go outdoors. And but I want to tell you that going outdoors is very important. And here's what it is. Viruses are stealthy criminals. They know how to shut off your body's burglar alarm system. What they do is you go in your body and they make it so your body doesn't produce interferon. Those natural killer cells are basically held hostage. This was especially true in 1918 with the Spanish influenza. It's been shown to be true with the bird flu that's come and gone over the years. And COVID had this property to a certain degree as well. If you get lots of sunlight, it makes it so the virus can't do that to you. And so if you get plenty of sunlight, your interferon won't be suppressed. It'll be free to go fight these viruses. And everybody seems to know about the ability of sun to trigger vitamin D production. And that's important. Vitamin D is definitely going to be helpful. And people who get plenty of vitamin D have far fewer winter respiratory tract infections. They have less inflammation caused by cytokines. Those are mediators of inflammation in your body. And vitamin D does stimulate your natural killer cells. When we look at COVID and the studies, we discover that people with high vitamin D levels had 2/3 fewer COVID-19 infections, half as many became severe, and 1/3 the death rate. So you wouldn't want to be low in vitamin D. But let me just say right here, right up front, that vitamin D may merely be a marker for the fact that you did get lots of outdoor sunlight, and taking the pill might not totally replace good sunlight. Of course, if you come into winter and you haven't had your sun, you certainly would want to get something. But this is a very interesting area to think about. Now, sunlight also kills viruses with its UVB. And so you want to look at being outdoors quite a bit. And this, what really puzzled me is during pandemic, people were outdoors wearing their masks. I mean, that doesn't really make sense. And so you want sunlight, exposure to natural sunlight 1 hour a day for 12 days in one study significantly increased the circulating immune cells, like natural killer cells, for up to 2 weeks after the end of the experiment. Was it the vitamin D, or was it something else? Let me tell you, the something else happens to come in two different forms. One is sunlight increases your intermitochondrial melatonin. Number two, sunlight helps your blood to flow more freely through the blood vessels. It reduces the friction at the interface with the blood vessel wall. And so there's a lot of benefits to sunlight that could help you in many ways. And so getting out in the sun is very helpful. Let's talk about rest. Doesn't that picture look very restful? Well, people who have insomnia don't do well in a pandemic. Insomnia will increase your likelihood of getting sick. Sleep deprivation. Mice which were sleep deprived one night for 7 hours contracted a viral disease they would otherwise have resisted. And so even missing one night of sleep can be a problem. And part of your sleep, part of the benefits of sleep is melatonin. There's two places you get melatonin: from your pineal gland at night and during the day in your mitochondria from direct sunlight. And so the mitochondrial melatonin wouldn't be affected, but the pineal gland melatonin would be affected, and that's right up there in your brain. And if you don't have some melatonin from your pineal gland, you have more neuroinflammation. A lot of these pandemics cause neuroinflammation, and so you'll be already inflamed when the bug hits you, and you'll be set up for more problems. Another thing that affects you with neuroinflammation is being under stress. Didn't we start out talking about the fear of COVID scale? Yeah. So you don't want to have a lot of stress. How do we deal with stress? Remember, we read a Bible text that said God would be with us during a plague or pandemic or pestilence. So we need to trust in God, otherwise we're going to have more neuroinflammation. Well, oh, wow, that's interesting. And there was a study done on Seventh-day Adventists down in Phoenix, Arizona, where they were looking at what was happening with different people's blood levels of antioxidants. Actually, they weren't studying Adventists. Adventists showed up as having high levels of antioxidants, even those who weren't necessarily vegetarian. And I attribute it directly to their adherence to God's command to keep the seventh-day Sabbath. And that's one of those commands that God says, if you keep my commandments, then I will not put any of the diseases upon you which I brought upon the Egyptians, for I am the Lord that healeth thee. And so God is blessing people who follow His advice with immune-stimulating antioxidants. Now, exercise, getting outdoors. I say outdoor exercise. I mean, if it's raining, snowing, and just really bad, you want to get indoor exercise. You don't want to skip to exercise. But in one study, moderate exercise. Oh, what do you mean by moderate? If you tell a bunch of type A personalities that if they exercise, they'll be able to avoid the pandemic, they'll all go join a club to learn to run a marathon. Marathon runners have worse immune systems. Competitive sports people have worse immune system. Doing something you enjoy doing and not killing yourself at it, doing it moderately, has been associated with significant reductions in the risk of viral infection. And so here you have the family out walking the dog, having a good time. That's immune stimulating. And during COVID-19, patients who consistently met the physical activity guidelines were 2.5 times less likely to die of COVID-19. The physical activity guidelines were about getting a half hour of exercise every day, including walking a certain distance. And so activity 2.5 times less likely to die of a pandemic. Get outdoors. Become active. I mean, outdoor exercise has positive effects on the lungs, the vascular endothelial function, especially when we wanted to manage COVID-19 or get people over long COVID, rehabilitating them after the disease. Now, if I did get sick, would I want to exercise? Shouldn't I just crawl in bed, just let my eyes look out over the top of the pillow and have people get me stuff? Well, not really, because perfect health depends on perfect circulation. If you're laying in bed, you don't have much circulation. Everything slows down. So moderate exercise I mean, don't go to fatigue, that wouldn't be good. But moderate exercise performed in the initial days of an infection actually reduces mortality in laboratory animals, and I would therefore suspect in human beings as well. And so be active, just be, circumspect if you aren't feeling too good, but don't get hung up in bed, because you might get there, you might have a permanent spot there. Now, prolonged exercise led to increased morbidity and tended to decrease survival, like running a marathon. So I had a friend in medical school. He was a year behind me. He decided to take up marathoning. Pretty soon he was having more colds and flus. I had a pastor who ran marathons. He got leukemia. Then they gave him chemo. He was supposedly over his leukemia. He went back to running the marathon, and he just up and died of his leukemia. It suppresses your immune system to over-exercise. It's not like you need to prove to the world that you can run that far, that fast. You want to do things in moderation. And when you're doing it, you want to make sure you wear good clothing. Tight clothing is not helpful. The dress should fit easily, obstructing neither circulation of the blood nor the free, full, natural respiration. You don't want something tight around your chest. The feet should be suitably protected from cold and damp. Clad in this way, we can take exercise in the open air, even in the dew of the morning or evening, or after the fall of rain or snow, without the fear of taking cold. And speaking of taking cold, you want to dress well. If your limbs are all free out in the air and it's cool, your blood's going to be chilled back from your limbs to your chest, abdomen, and pelvis. This will cause congestion of blood, slowing of blood, increasing of inflammation, and more likely to get a viral disease. Now we're going to switch to the next, what we're calling natural remedy, and that is proper diet. Oh, what's he got in his hand? Well, an apple a day, right? Keeps the doctor away. Well, so, and an apple is very fresh, isn't it? Fresh fruits and vegetables have been shown to invigorate the immune system and prepare you for pandemics. Of the fresh vegetables that were shown to be helpful, especially under COVID, green leafies were universally helpful, and in all countries. Different countries were surveyed, but when they looked at their epidemiology, the people eating the greens, along with other things, were the most successful at avoiding COVID-19. On the other hand, people eating lots of fat didn't do well. People eating lots of fat, the fat tends to wipe out the natural killer cells. People on a high-fat diet see nearly an 80% drop in the function of natural killer cells, especially fat from animals, especially things like butter, anything high in cholesterol. It reduced natural killer cell to 1/4 the usual activity. So you want to make sure that your natural killer cells are happy. When they get oil, when they get fat, the interferon production doesn't work. It's like the gun's loaded, but it's jammed. I can't pull the trigger. Sugar is not helpful either. Here's an interesting study where they took white cells and they fed them different amounts of sugar and then sent them to go looking for bacteria to kill. If the person had no sugar, then each white cell could consume 14 bacteria. If they consumed 12 teaspoons of sugar, about the amount of sugar in a common soda, then they could only consume 5.5 bacteria each. 2 sodas or a banana split's worth of sugar wiped out the immune system so that each white cell could only consume 1 bacteria. That doesn't sound good for fighting a pandemic. And indeed, sugar is very dangerous for your immune system. Another thing that people don't realize is that milk is immunosuppressive. And since it's immunosuppressive, it cuts down your natural killer cell activity. And if you eat lots of milk protein, it increases your risk of cancer, and natural killer cells are responsible for fighting cancer as well. And so you can see the effect. So milk would not be a good thing to be drinking a lot of if you wanted to avoid an infectious disease pandemic. Now let's talk about vitamins. The standard for how much you need in the way of vitamins is the USRDA, at least in America, National Academy of Sciences, NIH, and that kind of thing. And when you end up with a deficiency of vitamins, in other words, you only get 50% of what's recommended, there is depression of natural killer cell activity. Notice what I put in the picture to represent a diet free from nutrition, a diet that doesn't have enough vitamins. White bread, a white flour product. You got it. So this white bread isn't going to help you survive a pandemic. Things that would help are things high in vitamins, such as carrots and their vitamin A. If you get deficient in vitamin A, you're in trouble. But if you get plenty of vitamin A, it helps boost both your natural killer cells and your B cells, along with the IgA. And so carrots would be a good thing to get because of the vitamin A. Oh, well, maybe I can just take a vitamin A pill. I don't like carrots, I don't like to chew, and I don't know if I want those, but can I just take a pill? No. Pills are actually dangerous. Vitamin A pills have, in past studies, been shown to increase your risk of cancer. If you smoke, we know you have a risk of lung cancer. Taking vitamin A pills will increase the risk of lung cancer another 10%. Same is true of vitamin E pills. Same is true of folic acid pills. And so you don't want the pill form. You want the naturally occurring vitamins. Besides, when you take the naturally occurring, there's almost always a lot more bioavailable, better absorption, higher levels in your bloodstream after doing so. Where would I find vitamin A? Well, sweet potatoes, carrots, paprika. What's paprika? It's a seasoning, cayenne pepper. Okay, 100 grams of that's going to be an awful lot. Well, work down the list of things that are easier to work with, but notice how much there is. So you need 5,000 units, so that means you'd only need a tenth of a dose of the paprika, or 10 grams. But anyway, looking here, we have sweet potatoes, carrots, kale, spinach, squash, cantaloupe, broccoli. Milk doesn't have very much. Why do I have it on the list then? Soybean oil. Why do I have it on the list if there's none? Eggs, chicken, beef. There's none. Why do you have it on the list? Well, I just wanted to show you. You go eating that stuff, you got to be very careful or you're going to be malnourished. There's very little nutrition of any value in beef, chicken, and eggs. It's all protein and fat. And that isn't what you need for the pandemic. What you need is fruits and vegetables. Now, that's vitamin A. Let's look at vitamin E. I already told you that the pills are no good. And people that have plenty of vitamin E do much better. It reduces the viral numbers. It's like virus birth control. It works to prevent the virus-mediated decrease in food intake and weight loss. A lot of people lose their appetite under a virus. And the vitamin E makes it so you don't lose your appetite under the virus. And it lowers inflammatory mediators like tumor necrosis factor. So this is a good thing, and you can find this in a lot of foods. Sunflower seeds, you'll notice that sunflower seeds are a bit of a superfood as we go along because they keep coming up on more lists. There's almonds, flaxseed, wheat germ, olive oil, pine nuts, etc., etc. And so lots of vitamin E from good sources will be beneficial. How about folic acid? Well, that's the vitamin company's substitute for folate. And severe folate deficiency has been shown to reduce lymphocyte counts, that's your B cells that produce IgA, by 60% and significantly impair natural killer cell activity. How do I increase my folate? Well, in the study, they could reverse it with good dietary changes, green leafy vegetables, or supplementation, but not both. What do I mean by not both? In that study, they first started and they gave a bunch of people good spinach, and it improved their folate levels. The second group got folic acid, and it did improve their folate levels, and both were seen to have some help. But then they said, well, let's combine the two. When they did that, the folate went down as though they hadn't been doing it. And so you don't want to do both for sure. And I'm just saying you don't want to do the pill at all. But anyway, folic acid, no, we're going to go, well, that's what USRDA measures, but we're going to say folate, because it's going to be folate in your arrowroot, it's going to be folate in your wheat germ, peanuts, sunflower seeds, etc. And so get good food, eat it, enjoy it, and expect it to do you a lot of good. And what's arrowroot? Well, it's a thickener, a lot like cornstarch. It's at least readily available in stores around where I live in the U.S. And all right, vitamin C. Oh, vitamin C is also very antioxidant. It helps reduce lipids or fats from going oxidized, which we call lipid peroxidation. It makes sure the lungs don't get inflamed. If you consume it before the viral illness, it helps prevent symptoms. If you consume it after, it helps reduce symptoms as well. And it increases other white cell activity, such as macrophages that are involved in keeping you well and healthy. And how about taking a vitamin C pill? Well, I read a study where they compared taking a vitamin C pill, which was 500 milligrams, to taking the juice of one lemon, which under analysis showed it only had 43 milligrams of vitamin C. You know, that's 1/10 or less than 1/10. But at the end of the study, when they compared the blood levels of antioxidants and vitamin C, the people who got the lemon had far more vitamin C and antioxidants. So pills aren't at all what they're, you know, made out to be. Whatever the 500 milligrams was, I don't know. And a lot of that vitamin C is made with Aspergillus mold grown on GMO corn. It's not coming from rose hips or, you know, some nice natural source. You can get a natural source like peppers there. Bell peppers are high, strawberries, chives, red cabbage. Notice that there's more in red cabbage than in lemons. Broccoli, pineapple, kale, all kinds of good sources of vitamin C. Notice there's none in fish. Yeah, the fish used it all for himself and didn't send any on to you and its muscles. Okay. There's minerals that are also important. Selenium. Selenium is an immune booster. It helps for fighting cancer, helps for fighting COVID. People who had plenty of selenium did much better, and it increases the natural killer cell activity. It reduces the inflammation. It helps the tissues to keep from getting so damaged by the virus and helps them to recover more quickly. A diet high in selenium reduces COVID-19 cases by 10 times. High selenium levels in populations like in China predicted survival, and lower selenium levels increased the death rate. Where do I get selenium? You're looking at it. What are those? Brazil nuts. And so the USRDA is like 70 micrograms. You get 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of Brazil nuts, and you get 1,917. I mean, this is a lot. You can get it from sesame seeds, wheat, sunflower seeds as well. But I'm just telling you, Brazil nuts, I often tell people take 3 to 5 of these things a day, especially when they want to up their selenium levels. There's another mineral, which is zinc. High zinc levels reduce COVID-19 recovery time by 2/3. I'm talking, this was a big deal. If you were low in zinc, it took you 24 days to get over it. If you were well stocked with zinc, it took 8 days. So zinc makes a huge difference. Zinc balances immune responses and also has a proven direct antiviral action. It is used by the antibodies to help fight the virus as well. What would be a good source? Well, you're looking at it there, pumpkin seeds. And so it's necessary for natural killer cell activity. And you need a little more of it for your immune system than what is perhaps studied by the USRDA for growth. And but they say you need 15 milligrams. And where would you get it? Well, wheat germ, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, wheat bran, pine nuts, etc. And so getting good zinc is important. Now let's talk about individual foods, superfoods, foods that have phytochemicals that help you be prepared for a pandemic. Grapes are in that category with their phytochemical resveratrol, and it strongly inhibits the replication of viruses within the cell. This is like, yeah, an antiviral. And it significantly improves survival of virus-infected laboratory animals. Apples, have you heard it said, an apple a day keeps the doctor away? Well, for a pandemic, especially one that affects the lungs, it is definitely helpful. 5 or more apples per week, you might think of 1 a day. Improves lung function. People eating an apple a day actually breathe an extra 138 milliliters of air with every breath. And they contain quercetin, which inhibits viral reproduction. Garlic is also a superfood. When we take it and we give it to people, in one study it reduced viral illnesses by 63%. And this was amongst people who lived in a commune. So half the commune got garlic, the other half didn't. The people that got the garlic didn't get the viral illnesses that winter. And during 1918 pandemic, it's reported that 20 people religiously ate garlic every day, and none of them got the flu. And it also helps with social distancing. So it's got 2 purposes. Then there's onions, same family. It's high in quercetin, just like apples, along with green leafies. And it protects against the inflammation, the oxidative stress that viruses use to destroy some of the cells in your body. It's also found in some beans, like soy. And so soy has a strong antioxidant property. It also stimulates the immune system. Don't be confused by the dairy's onslaught on soy, because they'd like to have you believe that it's dangerous. But it's actually healthy if it's not genetically modified, and it shows benefits not only for viruses but cancer, which oftentimes, as you'll learn from our cancer talk in this series, are the source of cancer. So, soy is helpful. Another thing that's helpful is turmeric. You see, with all these viruses causing damage to tissues, you can protect your tissues with this particular herb, and it's from India. It's good at treating inflammation. It inhibits the cytokines responsible for tissue damage. I would be taking lots of turmeric, maybe a tablespoon a day. You can make it into tea, you can add it to dressings, you can put it in your water, whatever you like. Then there's elderberry, elderberry extract, elderberry, some people make jam out of it. Elderberry fruit and flower extracts can inhibit binding of COVID-19 spike protein to the ACE2 receptors. It's basically blocking COVID from getting into cells, and that's very good. You don't want to just eat fresh raw elderberries. They need a little bit of processing. They're very high in some toxic things, but they are a very good food, medicinal food. Elderberry extract has been shown to have antiviral action, and but they aren't as strong at reducing the inflammation in the lungs as, say, grapes and those other things. Let's talk about some herbs now. Herbs are sort of God's medicine. Herbs were given for the service of man. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nation. And some of the herbs that were helpful for coronaviruses would be things like astragalus and licorice, chameleon plant, Chinese cedar, alpha and beta pinene from pine. So one of the things I like to do for patients when they got COVID was to make pine needle tea. I actually went out to the pine trees with my scissors and I started giving the tree a haircut. And then I would bring some back and I'd put 2 teaspoons worth of cut up pine needles in a cup of boiling hot water, let it set for a little bit. It actually didn't have a lot of flavor. You'd think pine needles would be, astringent or sour or turpentine-like, but no, they didn't have much flavor. But boy, people seem to really benefit from that. And it really blocks the access of the virus to the cells also. And you can use essential oils as well. Get one of these ultrasonic vaporizers, those diffusers for essential oils, and put some of these oils in there. Different oils were helpful. Pine oil for sure, and other ones that were helpful were your cedar oil, lemon oil. We also used oil of oregano. I thought that one was really helpful. I mean, there's probably some oils that wouldn't be helpful, but those are ones that showed promise and had some literature backing. And so we used them and we felt they were very helpful. People's fevers broke if you put them to bed with the diffuser running by their bed in some cases. Honey inhibits the entry of coronaviruses into host cells. Honey is not just, maple syrup or corn syrup. It's a special product with lots of flower components in it. It's literally flower nectar, and it helps boost the immune system. And it's also very beneficial to mix it with turmeric. It helps the turmeric to absorb. And so a nice mixture is to mix turmeric and honey together. And boy, this sounds like dessert, doesn't it? Well, yeah, it does. And honey is one of the best cough medicines as well. In studies comparing honey to your favorite, even doctor-prescribed cough medicine, honey did just as well or better. Now, I mentioned plant diet earlier. Compared to people who are eating largely from the animal kingdom, omnivores, vegans or plant-based vegetarians had significantly higher levels of vitamin A, C, and E. And we talked about those vitamins. And these things then, these vitamins in the bloodstream doubled the activity of natural killer cells. So just be thinking, if I eat good food, I'm going to have good health. One of the things that happened to our COVID people who either got the actual virus or took one of the vaccines is their blood became thick, it became hypercoagulable, and they had trouble with thrombosis and so forth. And so looking for things that helped amongst natural remedies, we discovered that there's certain things that are very natural that are helpful, such as pineapple. Pineapple is high in vitamin C, it reduces clotting, it's very fibrinolytic, meaning it breaks down those fibrin clots that are causing trouble. Grapefruit improved blood fluidity. Turmeric, garlic, and sesame all thinned the blood. Herbs that make a tea out of that can be helpful is Chervil. Another one is King of Bitters. That's common out there that has blood thinning properties. Good hydration. I mean, if you're dehydrated, your blood's going to be thick and more coagulable. So getting good hydration thins the blood. And so we say men should drink 3.7 liters a day, women 2.7. And avoid fried foods, fatty foods. They thicken the blood. They make it more likely to clot. Avoid refined foods such as white flour products, white rice, and they lack fiber. So you want to avoid sugar, white flour, or white rice. They all thicken the blood and make it more likely that you'll get clots, strokes, heart attacks, necrosis of fingers and toes as they lose blood flow. The higher the percentage of your diet is fresh fruits and vegetables, the more likely you are to avoid these clots. Avoid inflammatory foods, foods that are fermented, vinegar, soy sauce, cheese, wine, etc. They just increase the likelihood of clotting. Well, what are we talking about here? Isn't this the original diet? The Creator's diet? Fruits, grains, nuts, vegetables? Yeah, there you go. So we've talked about diet now, and we've talked about the Creator's diet. Interesting. Well, let's talk about abstemiousness or temperance, things you should avoid. Certainly smoking. If it's a viral illness that goes to your lungs, what do you think is going to happen if you smoke your lungs full of tobacco? Not going to be helpful. Smokers are 1.5 times more likely to catch a viral illness and 70% more likely to miss work because of it. That's not a good advertisement. Guess we should put that on the back of the packs of cigarettes. Alcohol and immunity. Alcohol wipes out those natural killer cells. That's not going to be helpful. And you mix the two, it's even worse. It's a multiplied effect, not just additive. And anything fermented, so cheese, alcohol beverages, vinegar, soy sauce, nutritional yeast, salami, chocolate, vanilla, mushrooms, brown rice syrup, sour cream, yogurt, sauerkraut. I mean, all these things are going to already have your body in inflammation. When the virus comes along, he doesn't need to create the inflammation. You already did it for him. Much better to eat fresh food that hasn't shown the ill effects of inflammation and infection. Well, if I get inflammation and infection, I'm sick. So what about if the vanilla catches a bunch of bacteria, or your sauerkraut's loaded with bacteria? It's already sick. So I'm eating sick food. Yeah, that'd be sick food. And it's loaded with viruses too. So you want to avoid these things. You don't want to eat sick food if you want to be well. Okay, let's talk about other lifestyle issues. Obesity. If you're overweight, every one of your fat cells has lots of ACE2 inhibitors. This is where COVID made entry. Other things make entry. And so you don't want to be overweight. Weight loss reverses this threat. Losing weight can be helpful. One of the ways to lose weight is to eat less food, at least less calories. How do I eat less calories? Simple way is to eat like what this lady's eating there. That's looks like what I had for lunch. And these things don't have many calories, but they certainly will fill you up. So you don't have to, feel like you can't fill your stomach. At least you don't want to overfill your stomach, but you don't have to feel like you have to go on a tiny little bit of food. But caloric restriction is accomplished by choosing foods that are nutrient dense instead of calorie dense. And so when we do that, at least in studies in the laboratory, 60% dietary restriction, 60% fewer calories, increase natural killer cell numbers fourfold, and their activity twofold. That's a lot. Wow, your soldiers have quadrupled in number, and they're twice as energetic. That's a real deal, isn't it? Well, yeah, if you want to avoid these pandemics, that sounds great. What if I ate nothing? Well, fasting has its benefits too. I wouldn't just go on a permanent fast. You'll eventually run down. But 3-day fast tends to reset the immune system. A 1-day fast boosts the immune system. It protects the stem cells. It reduces inflammation. Water is very helpful. And people who drink more water have a lot less respiratory tract infections. And so it's interesting that Isaiah 44:12 says, "He drinketh no water, and is faint." Fascinating. But water isn't just there for internal use. External use is very helpful. By external use, I mean hydrotherapy. We get our information from what we did during the 1918 pandemic. And here is a bar graph that compares Army hospitals, the best hospitals of 1918, with outpatient hydrotherapy done in people's homes by people who knew hydrotherapy, or 10 Seventh-day Adventist sanitariums which treated people with hydrotherapy in an institutional setting. Notice that if you went to the Army hospital with your 1918 Spanish influenza, you had a 17% chance of getting pneumonia and a 7% chance of dying. If you did home hydrotherapy, you had a 9% rate of pneumonia and a 4% mortality rate. If you went to one of these Adventist sanitariums where you had a whole bunch of people to work on you around the clock, then only 1% got pneumonia and a 0.5% died. Kellogg, the famous Battle Creek Sanitarium, says he didn't lose a single patient. You know, it's hard to predict when the patient's going to show up to your sanitarium. They might already be, doomed because they waited too long. But anyway, the results were much better with hydrotherapy. Why were the government hospitals having so much? Studies now show that it was because they were using aspirin to bring down the fevers. And this was actually detrimental to patient recovery. And so the drugs did not help. Now, what do I do if I feel like I'm coming down with a flu or some other viral illness? Well, I go to the hydrotherapy unit in my house, which looks sort of like this. Well, it's not my house, but a shower. And you can do hot and cold showers. And what it does is it boosts your white count. And what I'll do is I'll turn on the hot until I feel like I'm getting hot, like I'm making a fever commence. And I got that feeling before, and I checked my temperature as I did it, so I sort of know they correlate. And then I do 1 minute of cold. Then I repeat to 1 minute, 1 or 2 times, 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, 3 minutes hot, 1 minute cold, or hot until you feel like you're getting a fever, and cold for 1 minute. Hot till you feel like you're getting a fever, and cold for 1 minute. And you can do it either way, but I tend to do it for the fever feeling, which takes almost 10 minutes usually to induce. And so this is a very effective thing. I mean, there's no magic to it. If you just get in the shower and do different levels of hot and cold and stimulate your immune system, it's going to be helpful. And then I, usually after doing this to myself or some patient, I'll send them off to bed or go myself to bed for at least a half hour, usually for the night. And that's very effective. I mean, sometimes I knew I was coming down with something bad, and I did that and went to bed, and the next morning, no sign of the illness. I had licked it. Now, if you just want a bath to do just to make your immune system more active, or a shower, a cool shower with a good scrubbing of the skin will actually augment your white cells to be prepared for a fight of any bug. They've done these studies where they did this to like military recruits, had them do cold baths and then go out on a march in the snow, and they did much, much better. A lot can be done with a cool bath, and you would think, oh, I'm going to be terribly cold, I'll just never recover, I'll be cold all day. Actually, a quick cool sponge bath or tepid bath or shower with a good scrub, and you get out, you feel alive, you feel warmer than when you got in, because your body does this reaction of let's warm up, and it really works. Now, if you have the actual pandemic bug, influenza or coronavirus or whatever, then a fever is very helpful. Your body already likes to do a fever. What fever does is the raised temperature makes your white cells more able to fight viruses, more able to release toxic chemicals, and the toxic chemicals are more active in fighting the viruses or bacteria. And so inducing a fever can be very helpful to people who can handle it. And any amount of fever is going to be helpful. If you're really trying to kill a big one, I tend to shoot for 105 Fahrenheit or 40.5 Celsius and a 20 to 45 minutes. And if you don't achieve that, it's fine. If you get their temperature up a little bit, you've done something in which you will see benefit. Now, viruses can be captured, can be put on, charcoal. Charcoal's like fly paper for viruses. And so charcoal in binding viruses takes them out of your circulation, takes them out of your body. And here's what you can do. You can drink 2 tablespoons of activated charcoal powder in a glass of water. If you're not used to doing this and you have trouble with constipation, I'd add a couple teaspoons of psyllium husk powder or some other favorite fiber or stool softener to make sure you don't get constipated. But as this charcoal goes down your digestive tract, it'll pull out inflammatory cytokines. As it goes down your digestive tract, it'll clear up viruses. As it goes down your digestive tract, it'll pull out the toxins created by the viruses that cause you to be anorexic or not wanting to eat, that cause the natural killer cells not to be able to release interferon. It takes away all the toxins that the virus is using to affect your body and carries them out of your body. And you can also use these, you use charcoal as a poultice. Make a poultice, put it on over the organ that's giving you trouble. In 1918 it was the lungs and perhaps the kidneys and the brain. And so putting charcoal poultices on any area that's giving you trouble can be very, very helpful. How do I make a charcoal poultice? My favorite way is to take a saucepan, put in 1 cup of water, put it on the stove to heat up, add 3 tablespoons of activated charcoal powder and 3 tablespoons of ground flaxseed. Bring it to simmer, bring it to boil, let it cool, and then it'll be a jelly that you can put on a piece of paper like this gentleman is, and then you can put another paper over the top of it, so you folded it inside, and once it's folded inside, you make it wet on the side that's going to go toward your skin, wherever you're going to put it, and this will pull out toxins through your skin, inflammation through your skin. It'll pick up viruses off your skin, and it's very effective at reducing inflammation. Very helpful. Now I want to get into some environmental things that sort of are modern technology. You know, they can, so I've had homes where I lived in and I had a remote control. I could push the button and open my garage door. I could do it remotely. That's common these days. You know, they can remotely turn on viruses through 5G. And so electromagnetic fields promote certain viruses. It increases inflammation. It causes compromise of the immune system. It punches holes in your blood-brain barrier so the virus can have access to your brain. And you're holding these things up to your head. I'm just sort of warning you here. Now, there's some social things that are beneficial for pandemics, and that is having loving, trusting relationships. What's the connection? What's the mechanism? Are you just saying this because you like them? No, the science is behind it. What happens is when you have loving, trusting relationships, it increases the oxytocin in your body. And this oxytocin carries special functions in the immune defense and in your blood system, homeostasis, and in surveillance by the immune system for viruses. Oxytocin can block viral invasion, suppress cytokine storm, reverse lymphocytopenia, that's when the B cells get too low in numbers, and prevent progression to adult respiratory distress syndrome and multiple organ failure. I mean, this is incredible. Get more oxytocin, the love hormone. Yeah, we have a natural source of this amazing compound, loving, trusting relationships. I mean, I should probably be talking more on that than whether or not you should be eating carrots, huh? Well, say that for another lecture, but loving, trusting relationships with your spouse and your children, or how about with your God? Yeah, trust in divine power. People who don't trust in God, people who have psychological issues like depression, their natural killer cells are depressed too. Their lymphocytes, those B cells, are not going to work well. And so depression needs to be addressed, or you're going to be a victim of a pandemic. Stress. Certainly, people who don't trust in God are going to end up with high stress hormones. These will affect the natural killer cells and the IgA levels. And you'll have a lot more respiratory tract infections. Interesting, one group looked at when people got mad, angry, upset, frustrated, and they found out that those people who had a 5-minute episode of anger lost their IgA levels for up to 5 hours. Doesn't that just make you mad? Oh no, don't get mad. This is a big issue. And so keep calm, take it easy. It's a survival technique. Now, trust in divine power leads people to help others. They don't just live for themselves. They aren't just all about hunkering down and hiding from COVID. They're looking at ways to help other people. They live to give. In one study, mortality was significantly reduced for individuals who provided support to friends, relatives, neighbors, and their spouse. On the other hand, just receiving support really didn't extend life. But so it really shows you that it is more blessed to give than to receive. Right. I mean, are you having trouble with depression, bipolar, anxiety? Has multiple sclerosis affected you, or any kind of neuropathy or tremors like Parkinson's? Having trouble with heart disease or heart failure or stroke? People with any of these were more likely to die of COVID. But on the other hand, the pleasure of doing good to others imparts a glow to the feelings. Well, that'll get you over your depression, bipolar, and anxiety, which flashes through the nerves. Well, that'll get you over multiple sclerosis, neuropathy, and tremors. Quickens the circulation of blood. Well, that gets you over heart disease, heart failure, and stroke. Man, and induces mental and physical health. So find somebody else to help. It is more blessed to give than to receive. So you see now how the 8 natural doctors, taken with their scientific backing, do a lot to make sure you won't end up victim to some pandemic. Practice these all the time. You can go to our website and download a handout that will show what these things are. This is northernlightshealtheducation.com. On the left-hand side, you see presentation handouts. And so this has been Pandemics Today, Cause, Prevention, and Remedies, another episode of Blueprint for Health and Healing, Reversing Disease from its Foundation.